Northwest Insurance. Auto, business, home and more. Who said insurance was born? Protect your car, protect your family. Northwest Insurance. If you need a helpful team, the best in the community. Grab your phone, what are you waiting for? Northwest Insurance. Northwest Insurance.
Hola, 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 and welcome to the first of what we hope will be many episodes of Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas, sponsored by Northwest Insurance Agency. I'm your host, Mark Villasana, owner and agency of said principal of Northwest Insurance, and we are elated to be here with you today to discuss a little insurance and a lot of what makes Dallas tick. Joining me today is my BFF, my co-host, marketing manager for Northwest Insurance, and my sister from another religion. Hello, Lila. How are you doing today?
Mark, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Great. So
for our inaugural episode.
I know. Can you believe it?
No. I mean, I can't. It's been 2 years in the making.
I know we talked about this, I think, at my coffee table one day at the house, and we were like, let's do a podcast. Yeah. And here we are. I cannot believe it.
Here we are.
Okay.
April 4th.
I think for me, we're putting me over the finish line is taking a look at all the things going around in today's world, and I felt the world needed one more podcast.
I mean, if Whitney from The Hills is doing one and she's looking at old episodes from 15 years ago, why would we not do one?
I don't know. I mean, and an insurance podcast at that. I mean, if people have gone this long without an insurance podcast, I don't know how they've been doing it.
I don't know either.
I know. So we'll see.
Time.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. Seriously, though, you have a little bit of podcast experience, don't you?
I do. A few years ago, I really dove head in to loving musical theater. And as usual, like I am to everything, I'm a latecomer. And a friend of mine who'd been a theater kid since he was 8, he helped me to grow my love of musical theater, and we would go to shows and plays together, and separate sometimes too. And we've done trips to New York. And I said, we should start a podcast. And at the time he said, oh, that sounds great. But he really thought it was a kind of a stupid idea, but we still went forward with it. So we had a podcast for 1.5 years called Mark and Lila Love Broadway. And we had a blast with it. We would talk, just he and I. And we also interviewed really cool people on Broadway and locally. We had a great time.
That's your deal, doing podcasts with guys named Mark?
His was M-A-R-C. Your M-A-R-K. Next is Marky Mark.
Okay.
So I'm on a mission.
It's a hop, skip, and a jump from Broadway to insurance. So every time I'm watching Wicked, I'm thinking deductibles.
I mean, who doesn't watch The Sound of Music and then think, I need inland marine insurance?
Like I said, hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah.
There you go. Seriously, though, the purpose of the podcast really is we want to talk insurance in layman's terms. I know I've been in the insurance industry for 30 years. I've had my own agency for 30 plus years. You know that. You work with me. And a lot of people know they have to have insurance, because they either purchase a vehicle, they purchase a home, RV, motorcycle, whatever it may be. Someone has told them along the way they have to have insurance. But the risk is they don't know exactly what they're purchasing. They don't know what's in the innards of that policy. And that's where the money is right there. Because if you purchase a policy that is not going to properly cover what you bought, well, then, you're paying all that money for nothing. So that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to take a subject each week. We're going to try to break it down. For example, this week we were going to talk about home insurance. We're going to break that down and go over the coverages and maybe figure out where we can save you some money by some people are overcovered. Some people have not nearly as much coverage as they need. So we'll try and we'll take questions and answer people questions about insurance as simply as we can. To be honest with you, we all know that, if you're not in the insurance industry, insurance kind of sucks. It's not a fun subject. Nothing people love talking about. Most people either purchase it, they know someone who knows an agent, or they call a 1-800 number, or these days people get online and they buy the policy, boom, but they don't know anything else beyond that.
Right.
So we'll get into that. But secondly, what we're going to try to do, Lila, let's talk a little bit about the city of Dallas. The city I grew up in, I was born here in Dallas, went to high school here in Dallas. Shout out to Jesuit and TJ in North Dallas, and ended up going to college here at SMU. So I love everything about Dallas. I love, all the sports teams, the food, the art scene, everything. And, we're going to try to get in that. I don't know if you can mix insurance and anything really with insurance. But
I think we can. We're going to try and do that. Look, I've got my iced coffee. It's my third one for the day, so I think I'm ready to go.
We need jacked up Lila.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Who doesn't?
To things on video so they can see all this. So that being said about the insurance thing, we're going to scrap all of that today because of who our first guest is. This gentleman is really a Dallas icon. He has been coming into your bedrooms, in your cars, in your living rooms for over 30 plus years. He is really so influential. I don't know if he even understands how influential he is. He can really come up with a phrase, and within a week, people all across the Metroplex will probably be repeating it. So he is what I'd like to call the Fred Travellini of my generation. I'm an old guy. He'd be the Matt Friend of some of the new set, but he is co-host of the Marconi award-winning radio show, The Musers. He is a universally known radio personality, TV personality, author, actor, and just a genuinely great guy and badass for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Lila and insurance fanatics across the world, please join me in welcoming Mr. Gordon Keith from SportsRadio 1310 AM, The Ticket.
Woo! Hey, Gordon.
Thank you, guys, for having me. I can't tell you what honor it is to have you here sitting in front of me. Lila, can you believe it?
I can't.
Lila told me she was going to do this, and I was like, there's no way. You're BS. There's no.
Gordon and I go way back.
We do. We go way back, and I would not have said yes for just anyone.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We go back 30 years, and we don't see each other very much. As a matter of fact, when a little while ago when you came into the studio, we were like, when was the last time we saw each other? But we always stay in touch, and we've been friends again since the ticket was a year old, and that's when we became friends.
That's right. When basically the first year of the ticket, and been friends ever since. Yeah. So when you called, asked me to do this, I said, no, I stopped doing insurance podcasts.
I figured this was on your bucket list. This had to be a bucket list. Yeah. I mean, it's on mine, but yeah. So I guess thank you again, man. Especially with the weather's bad out there. Yeah. You made an effort to come here. I mean, really appreciative. I know. So you pretty much answered my first question, which is like, what the hell are you doing here? Why? What are you doing on an insurance podcast? But I got that. But so everyone knows you are an icon of Dallas. Everyone knows pretty much, I would say, most people know the backstory of the ticket and how it become this juggernaut it is now. But for those of us who may not know exactly, do you mind give us like a Cliff Notes version of how the ticket became what it is today and how you are, the Gordon Keith, who's certainly the Gordon Keith of Dallas? Yeah.
Well, it's a sports radio station it's based out of Dallas, Fort Worth, and we started in 1994. I was started off as an intern when I first went on the air, and our morning show host was Skip Bayless, who went on to be nationally famous on Undisputed and whatever the other show is that he did on TV. But he was the original morning show. We do the morning show now. We've done it for 28 years, first couple of years. Skip did it first year and a half. And it was just a little mom and pop kind of operation. The single radio station owner, it was just a guy and some of his friends. They got together. They bought a signal at 1310 AM, which is not a really coveted signal, and hired a bunch of basically no-name to mid-named people to start this radio station, and we were just kind of let loose, and it was a form of rebel radio that started way back in 94, which was kind of pre-internet, pre-podcast, and pre-streaming, and it just took off, and we expected it to probably go belly up within a couple of years. It didn't. It kept going. It had a cult following, and the cult following just grew and grew. And we've been predicting it's going to fail every single year for the past 3 years now. And it keeps going, which has been great.
I mean, it's phenomenal. Are you trying to tell me that Craig and George didn't have a fan club before the ticket started?
No.
In North Texas? In North Texas, they weren't
mid-level people in a couple other states.
I pictured there was like Lenny and Squiggy just chilling out at North Texas. They really knew each other before. I mean, how
friends in college.
Yeah.
And you're in Denton as we're recording this right now. But they were friends at North Texas State, and they got along really well and were really funny. And that was what was so great about Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket when it went on the air, was that guys like that who were so funny and just naturally humorous were kind of stuck behind doing serious sports on other stations. So when they were on the ticket, their personalities really came to shine.
And when they started out, was it initially going to be shtick laden, or was it when they came on the ticket, was it initially like, let's just talk sports and, go straight?
No, the idea was that they were going to bring their personality. North too. Okay. But it also, at the same time, the idea was it was going to be much more of a sports station at the time. We still are a sports station, but we very quickly saw in the first year of the ticket, things that made the ticket different and special, and the thing that seemed to resonate and catch on with the listeners was the fact that when we would joke around. So it was really a humor aspect of the station that made it so popular and made it so very different than other sports radio that was happening at that time around the country.
I mean, there's nothing going on. I'm a P1 from day one. I've been listening. Actually, in fact, this is not the first time we've been on the air together. This is the kind of like our reunion show, if you will. Back in, I think it was, I want to say 95. My wife from a former life worked at the ticket, and she was in the sales department. So she would set up these promos before the personalities would go out and do it. And she set up a promo for Kate Delaney, the sports princess. I don't know if you remember her. So anyway, so she'd set up this promo, and Kate's promo that evening was introducing Mike Ducey to the Metroplex. And they had a contest. Who could come up with the best saying introducing Mike Ducey to the Metroplex? And I don't know if it was at medieval times. So I don't know if it was medieval Dan. There you go, in Greenville.
On Luke.
Time. Yeah. It would have been a lot cooler if it was in times. Been on horses. But anyway, the deal was whoever come up with the best saying introducing Mike won a segment on the radio with you, Gordon.
Really?
So I did a segment that I then say a couple of evenings later with you and Jennifer Goldsmith. Was it Goldsmith?
Jennifer Smith.
Jennifer Smith. That was it. Lila, you ought to make everything Jewish. That's all. What do you think? Is Smith. So, Smith.
Yeah. Sworn as Goldsmith.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
And so you did this?
I did it with you.
And keep a tape of it, right?
Are you kidding? I was so nervous, man. I remember you put me on the spot. You asked me.
Running a business is unpredictable, but with the right insurance, you can face the unexpected with confidence. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we protect what matters most: your people, your property, and your future. Whether it's liability, property, or workers' comp, we tailor coverage to fit your business needs. Because when you're covered, you can focus on what really matters: growing your business. Call us today for a free quote at 1-855-887-5656 or visit us at nwagencies.com. Northwest Insurance Agency, protection that works as hard as you do.
You said you said your last name is Villasana or whatever. You're that Hispanic kid. And I was like, yeah. So you started quizzing me on Spanish words. And at the time, I really didn't speak that much Spanish. I just failed left and right. But I mean,
and then said, hey, look ahead 30 years.
He finally was like, man, something's missing in my career. My Garfunkel's out there. He's ready to do the reunion show.
If you would have asked me that evening if we'd be talking 30 years later on an insurance podcast, I would never understood any part of that.
I didn't. At the time, I was like a hanger-on to my wife, so I don't even think I worked. I just followed her from remote to remote. So, who knows? We were talking, Lila and we were talking about this on the way. It's crazy where life takes you. I mean, I'm sure being where you are now and who you are, and I mean, in reality, you are an icon in Dallas. No, in serious, no, in all seriousness, I mean, you are Lila's friend. So to Lila, you're a friend, but to me, you are someone who I really have grown up and older with. I'm probably a couple of years older than you, but I've grown up with you and you guys shtick. So, do you ever look back on that? Do you ever say, hey man, I've had my agency for 30 years. I'm always involved in the day-to-day workings of my agency. So I never look back and go, I came from there. Do you ever do that and go, man?
I have a lot of gratitude for where we came from. It's weird because I have two different mindsets. Part of it is when I think of when I was a young man, which I started the ticket when I was 22 or something like that. Wow. And I think if you told me then I'd worked there for 30 years, have a career there, I would be really depressed about I would think, God, and I have work at the same place for 30 years, in sports radio, which I have very little interest in sports. I'm not really the sports guy on the station, but then the other part of me thinks I would be absolutely thrilled, because to have a career that is that long in my hometown it's unheard of, that you could have as much success as the station has had and then not have to move jobs. Usually radio used to take another job in another market. You try to climb your way up the ladder, and I just kind of stayed in one place and went up the ladder there from intern to weekend. I was doing weekend shows, and I was doing that nightly show that you were on. And then we got moved to mornings, and we've been there ever since. So mornings is kind of the quarterback position in radio. So, you don't go anywhere from there.
Right.
And
it's a big responsibility too, to be in that position.
Yeah, you do. You just feel that as much as we goof around and make it a job that it seems like it. I don't think that we appreciate the importance of it, because we did start there at the very beginning, when it was just like, hey, this could fail tomorrow and it's no big deal. But at the same time, you realize when you're doing mornings, it's like you're part of an engine that's supposed to keep this whole thing going. And there's a lot of people that are employed at.
Exactly. Yeah.
And mornings is a bit of a pressure cooker, I just have to move fast, and I have to be concise, and stuff I don't even like to think about, or I get nervous.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure when you were 22 years old, you just like, I'm trying to hang on to a job. I just want to have a paycheck at Friday, so I'm going to hang out with my buddies. And now here you are, you sit, like, for example, I was listening this morning, and two things I thought I'd never heard was Willie Tubbs and orgasm in the same sentence. And those were used. And does that, do you think about things now when you say, before I'm going to say orgasm, do I have to, put that in my mind? I don't want to put that out there. Or...
Yeah. In the early days, we used to say things that were probably a lot more shocking than now. And, now when you realize, and maybe this just comes with experience, and maybe this just comes wisdom with age, but sometimes a joke will pop in my head for a character that we're going to do, and I'll do a cost benefit analysis on it, which is, insurance take the money enough to possibly risk my job, and all those that depend on me. And sometimes you back out of a joke because it's just like, it's not worth it.
But you got to have, you must have some clout, like more than you did when you're, getting coffee for Skip. You can't. Yeah. So you seem to be someone that really takes that into consideration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Because you do. Yeah. I try to be. It's weird to talk about me and responsibility even in the same sentence, so much so that I'd much rather use Willie Tubbs and orgasms.
And your audience I'm not a P1 day one, but I'm pretty close. And your audience depends on you. And I know you feel that responsibility also. There have been, I've had some rough years. Without going into detail, I've had some rough years along the way. And you and I have talked about those. And I depended on your show, you and Craig and George, to get me through. You start the day for me every day, when I'm getting ready to go to work or start my day, and then in the car and in my kitchen. And I'm one of thousands and thousands and thousands of listeners that I know tell y'all that all the time. So I know y'all feel that responsibility as well.
Absolutely. That kind of comment was really the thing that kind of changed my tune on the job. I used to think, and I've said this before, I used to think that our job was unimportant in the scheme of things, and it is in a very broad sense. But it's not unimportant completely, because the world needs jesters, because life is full of a lot of suffering, and a lot of people are struggling every day through things that happened in their life. I've lost my parents. I know listeners talk with them when they lose their parents, or their wife is going through something, so comments when people come up to you and say, hey, listen, I just want to thank you guys. Y'all have kept me entertained. My wife and I used to listen to you every day when we go to dialysis together, and y'all kept us laughing when we were going through a lot of health problems. And when people are grieving, they turn to something to cheer them up. And that's kind of the role that we just play in life. And I used to think that that was unimportant. And then I realized, oh, wait, the world does need clowns. That's part of the ecosystem that we definitely as humans to get through the thing. You know?
How difficult is that on you though, that having to perform, if you will, day to day? Because I'm sure you have shit days like all of us.
Right.
I know sometimes I don't want to go to the office. I can only imagine, and no one listens to me talk except Lila. So I can imagine, knowing you have to go out and perform, and when you've had a bad day or had, God forbid, something catastrophic in your life, how difficult is that?
At times it has been difficult at times. I went into pretty serious depression. I lost both my parents within actually it was 8 months to the day they died, both were badly cancer. And I remember after they both died, and I was the executor on their estate, and I was the kid of theirs, the closest to them. So, but there was a whole year and a half, 2 years, probably between that, where I would just go to work and do the job, and then I kind of would just not talk the rest of the day or interact with people. And it was a really bad place. And when I look back at that and wonder how the heck I even went to the job, tried to write jokes, come up with stuff, it's crazy.
Didn't you write an article about that? Because you were asked about it and you said it was like, I'm not trying to paraphrase here, but I'm just trying to think of the words that I would think of. It was just like rote work, like it was like core memory. You'd go to work and you got through that. But then I seem to remember you writing in an article that like to go pick up that Diet Coke can off the floor that needed to be thrown away, that you didn't have the energy for that, but yet you had the energy to go for 4.5 hours every morning for that year and get through that. And it's funny because when you look, because I've been there, and you look back on that and you're like, how did I do that? But you just did. It's a core memory taking you through it. But I loved how you put the energy to pick up the Diet Coke can that needs to go in the trash wasn't there.
Yeah, because I basically used all those resources for that morning's work, and then you just go and lay on the couch the rest of the time, and you basically can move your eyes around looking at all the stuff you got to do, but you're just paralyzed by lack of energy, a lack of motivation, and just kind of a certain kind of heavy detachment from the world.
Yeah,
that's the way I experience depression. People experience it different ways, but
didn't you also, wasn't that a time too, and I love this because I love typewriters, wasn't that the time when you would buy old and dirty and not usable typewriters and refurbish them? And wasn't that a way for you to change?
Friends that do that.
I actually have a friend, shout out to Clay, who has dozens and dozens of typewriters, and some of our mutual friends think it's kind of odd, and I love it when he posts that he just bought a new typewriter. And I always think of you because that was a form of therapy for you, wasn't it?
When I did have any energy to do something outside of work, one of the things I would do was I would buy these typewriters from thrift stores that will mail them to you when I'm in an auction, buying you $10, $15, and then they mail them to you, and I would just open the boxes, take out the typewriter, recondition the whole thing, fix it up to where it worked, clean it out, boil it, everything that needed to be done to it, and set it aside and pick up the next box that I'd ordered to do that one. So it was like this manual rote work that I would do, and it was the only thing that I liked doing because it was just with my hands. It didn't involve talking to anyone, right? Because I found talking to other people after you've gone through big grief episodes, it's very difficult. At least it was for me. Yes, as you find yourself in that position of having to comfort them or make them feel like they've comforted you enough, and it's a lot of emotional management. At least it was for me.
It's a lot of serving others when you don't want to, and you really need to be served, but you end up serving others. I totally get that.
People were trying to be nice, of course, of doing what they can, or I check in on you and everything, but you don't feel like even putting into words what you would feel because you don't even make it real what you feel. So yeah, I just like things that were wordless, alone, and with my hands so that my mind would not.
Are you generally like that? Because I know at work, all I do is talk to people, answer questions. Do you feel in your personal life, like when you get home, I don't want to talk to anybody?
And that's a side effect of the job. And it wasn't just I know the other two guys are like this too. They're on the show. My co-host, we're all kind of like that. It's like when we get off the air, particularly, we just reduced down to 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
We used to do 4.5 hours a day. After that 4.5 hours a day, you were kind of talked out.
That's all you did.
And so if you go home and the partner is chatting, you don't want to discuss, and you're like, I don't want to talk. Just finish talking.
Or without getting specifics, it has to affect the personal life sometimes, because sometimes the partner hasn't spoken to you all day and they want to share their lives. You've been talking Willie Tubbs and orgasms all day. You know what? I want to talk about your stuff.
Yeah. And I think it takes, partners, the spouses and things like that, time to get used to that idea of because you talk on the air doesn't mean you're real talkative. It's like that's a special place where you do that kind of personality. You have that facet of your personality. And a lot of times, I'll go to a party and I'll just sit there and I don't interact a lot, and people think that's weird, and they're like, well, if you're always joking around on the air, why aren't you on? Well, this is not a stage. I'm just hanging out there. I'll talk to the person that's...
In the heart of Dallas, we know that life moves fast. And when it does, you need an insurance company that's as reliable as the city we call home. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we're proud to be a part of the Dallas community, offering customized coverage to protect your home, your car, and your family. Whether you're navigating downtown or enjoying a weekend in the suburbs, we've got you covered every step of the way. We're more than just an insurance company. We're your Dallas neighbor, always here to help. Northwest Insurance, proudly serving Dallas.
I mentioned you grew up in Richardson. As a kid, were you the performer, or were you a theater kid? Where do these characters come from?
I was not a theater. I did take theater one year in high school, but I wasn't a theater kid. Like I was an actor in productions and it like that. I certainly was the class.
You were the class clown.
Were, on my own street stage that I was setting up at Blasey.
When did you move to Richardson from Mississippi?
I moved here before 7th grade.
Okay. So you're then even in Mississippi and in Richardson, were you like that all along? Were you the class clown?
I would say class clownship started probably around 5th, 6th grade.
Okay.
But it really kind of more took off after 7th, 8th.
And Gordon, what was that born from? Because I know me, I've always been the class clown too, but I was always the heavy kid. And that was my way of defending myself and getting out of situations. What did the class, was there, without getting specifics, with like personal pain, or was it you were the heavy kid, or acne, what, right. Or are you just funny?
I do think that you're correct in that oftentimes a sense of humor, an outward sense of humor, a public sense of humor is, it's a hallmark of some maladaptive behavior that you've done because of pain. Right. And, I was the heavy kid, but there were a few reasons why I think I became the funny kid. One was, my older brother was like the good looking athlete guy, so yeah, girls liked him for that. And it felt like he had covered that territory. So I had to, when you're the second born or the middle kid, which I was, had this older brother, so my whole life was lived in response to him. It was always a counter response to whatever territory that he had claimed with girls. I couldn't compete in that, so I had to do something different. And that was sure naturally gifted athletic, or as he was, and so on. So that was your niche. Yeah, my niche was going to be being funny or entertaining. Yeah. So that was one reason, and then the other reason was I remember when I started here, my first day at 7th grade, when I moved to this town, there was this dude in my PE class who made fun of my pants. And if you're so nervous, to a new school anyway. All right. So I went out and bought the outfit. I was so nervous. I thought I looked good and everything. And I went in this room and with the other boys, nobody I knew. You feel so alone anyway. And it was just such a huge psychological scar that this thing happened. I was so upset. I felt bad for my parents because then they're upset because it's happened to me on my first day at this new school after my mom had assured me that everything's going to be great, you're going to be your friends, it's going to be awesome and everything. And then it was horrible. And so then after that, I became very good at proactively making the first joke in class and establishing that brand of alphaness to not make myself a target for someone else's cheap comments. So
yeah, me, it was, I used the humor because I was a heavy kid, like I mentioned, but I used the humor to keep my lunch money. So that when bullies would come, literally when the bullies would come after me for the lunch money, I'd make them laugh. Ergo, keep the money. Rolls and butter, 5 cents. I don't know if you remember that.
And comedy is a strange thing because it does provide you kind of a skeleton key into a lot of different social groups that you normally wouldn't get into. You know, like the jocks will be fine with me because I could make them laugh. The cheerleaders, the alternative goth girls, when you find out the value of humor and the way it bypasses people's kind of critical faculties and you get right to their funny bone immediately and make them like you, I also had an interest in comedy and why does this joke work with this person and why does this joke work with this person? You kind of get good at finding what is their funny bone and then articulating the craft, putting it together in such a way that you can reach that person. And then how do you reach this person? How do you reach that person? I was just kind of interested in the science of comedy.
Yeah, no, because like you said, they're within your niche. They're niche comedies, so it's like a comic who performs blue at some sets, has to perform clean and on a cruise or something like that. You mentioned the other side of that coin earlier about depression. When you are the comedian, the other side of it is when you crash, it's pretty hard. Do you find that you circularly go through that, or is that something that happens every so often? Or
I have, and I think it's, I'm trying to think, I should probably do better at tracking it of how it happened. It was only a few years ago. I say a few years ago, it's probably about 8-9 years now, when I started recognizing patterns in my own depression, or even if it was a major depression, I'm talking about, like seasonal affective disorder, which is called SAD.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. But yeah, like I never put it together until I started looking back through journals and I was, around every October, I start getting depressed. Well, I didn't even know about this idea that the light outside really could affect your moods. And if you're not seeing enough sunlight, then a lot of times of wintertime, people that are kind of disproportionately affected by that lack of light. And you could do things like light therapy, which I ended up getting a light that you look at for 15 minutes a day during those winter months where you can get enough of that. Stuff like that it never would have occurred to me that is unrelated to any event in your life or any kind of...
It's just but I bet you're those close to you probably could pinpoint exactly when it happened and tell you, oh, really? Guess what, buddy? Because I know my wife could probably tell me, well, you're in one of your moods. But I get that because... when you feel you have to perform, do you ever feel though, you have to, does that pressure ever get to you like, man, I have to be on for example, if you're going to a ticket event and you walk in and you're going to walk around and meet all these P1s, do you feel like, well, I have to be the Gordon Keith who's on?
Yeah, you do feel that. And fortunately, it's pretty easy because people want you to be, they like you already. So you're not having to win. People are there because you've already won them over, right? You have a shared sense of humor. They have the same kind of sense of humor as you do and everything. So it's not like it's a difficult or heavy lift. But at the same time, I tend to be more of an introvert. The way it was explained, I don't even know if this is correct, but, kind of extroverts get their power from attention from other people.
Yes.
And, that charges them up. And with me, it's more of it drains energy away from me to be social all the time or for an extended period of time. I can take it in shorter doses. But like an event where you go to, it's a mixed bag because I do find myself depleted because it's one long reception line in a sense, talking to each person, you're interested in their life, you ask questions about that. They say you're reporting things back to you. You want to make sure that they feel your gratitude. That you recognize their gratitude that they've just given to you and you give back. It's a social exchange, which is an important thing for us to do as humans. But at the end of the night, I'm really, really tired. Like, it does. So I can't be the person who does an event like that for 2 hours. And then it's like, hey, let's go out drinking. I'm ready.
And let's be honest, the type of crowd you're drawing there at a ticket event is going to be, from the intellectual doctor, I'm sure, to the hardcore, hey, NASCAR guy, if you will, or somebody who's loud, not even NASCAR guy. I shouldn't say that, just the loud guy. So
what's wrong with NASCAR?
Not at all. I don't want because
NASCAR guy needs insurance.
I was about to say, you can't insure NASCAR here at North Mill.
Yeah, how much your rates on NASCAR?
No, we actually had a gentleman that did. Funny you asked it. Wanted to insure a vehicle, and the vehicle was more than, I would say, some gross domestic products of some small countries. Yeah.
And how expensive was the vehicle? Like 200,000?
Like 1.6, and he had several of them. So, they need insurance too. Getting back to NASCAR, isn't they? Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what people can insure. But getting back to what we talked about, the different types of people you meet, I'm sure sometimes you just want to turn it all off, right? You just want to go like, man, but you have to recognize I'm a public figure now. And so, I mean, how difficult to that, right?
And there's something about you that I really, really like. And this was when I was going through a very hard time. And I reached out to you in 2019 to talk about some losses I had that were similar to your losses. And there was something you said, and I've never forgotten it. And you said, I love to hear stories from other people. So, and you're a creative. Okay. So you're a creative, and I also see you as a big empath. And when I think about you and your job and what we're talking about, so you're going to guys' night out, right? And there's going to be hundreds of people there, and they all want to talk to you about different things. And you're going to see some regulars, and you're going to see some new people. And like you said, after 2.5 hours, you're going to go home and you're going to be drained. But guess what? You got to get up in the morning, and you're going on for 3 hours the next morning. But one thing I just really love that stood out to me when you and I would talk, and I was going through a hard time, and you said, I just love to hear other people's stories, because you and I would talk, and I would just data dump to you because we'd gone through similar things, and you just listened. I remember us being like in a cafe at a Barnes and Noble once, and there was nothing else around you except you were listening to my story. And I really appreciate that. And people really appreciate that. Your listeners do, and your fans and your friends. I mean, that really stood out to me. But that takes a lot. That takes a lot of concentration.
That's one of my favorite things ever is I'm very curious about other people, hearing people's lives. And that to me is not a heavy lift. Like, I love listening to people's stories because everybody's a novel. I mean, everybody you walking around, it's like a novel. Everyone's convinced that they live uninteresting lives. And I don't think I've ever met a person, which probably got the key, that I met that's like, wow, that person's boring. Because
he looked at you when he said,
I saw the minutes. I saw the glance. Amazing that people that people will answer questions. You could basically ask someone anything and they'll answer you, and it almost feels like it's because
people don't ever ask about their lives or so. Yeah.
And we're so digitized.
I have people say that, I mean, I don't know why I'm telling you all this.
Okay. So tell me,
you're not telling me anything this is stuff that feels like has happened in their life that they've not been reflective on, or something that no one has ever asked them about. When I'm talking to them, it sounds like the most important thing that happened in their life. But to them, it's like, when they're recalling their episode of when someone made fun of their pants and they completely changed their personality based on that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a huge pivotal moment to going, I guess I never thought of that.
Well, do you think that's because we're in such a digital world now? I mean, or is that born out of that? Or
I think that has changed, obviously, that people don't
interact as much
with each other face to face very much. And I also think that and none of these is right or wrong. Okay. So I want to say that just because I like hearing other people's stories doesn't make it wrong to not want to hear other people's stories, because the world takes all types for us to all fit together. There's also some people I know who they're just genuinely don't seem interested in other people. They're talkers,
Yes.
And when someone like me, when my piece of the puzzle comes in contact with the person who's a talker, it usually works out well. So they like talking and I like asking. So we need both types. But some people just aren't really curious about other people's lives. Other people are curious but don't feel comfortable asking a question. They don't know how it's going to be taken. And now I think we've also gotten to the point where we don't know how to interact with the people very often, because we don't do it very much.
We don't
these days, because we have a device that can mediate that interaction.
Do you get the opposite end, though? Because you're a public figure, do you get people coming up to you and telling you way too much information?
No, because there's no way too much information for me.
Yeah, from your perspective. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Right. Yeah.
So I said earlier that I've done it. I'm really into musical theater, etc. And what we're talking right now reminds me of something from my second favorite musical, which is The Outsiders, which is on Broadway right now. And I'll keep it real short, but the Pony Boy, who's the main greaser, he's at the Friday night, drive-in. And he talks to Cherry, who's the female Soch.
Cherry Valance, if you will.
Yes, thank you. And there's a song, and I listen nonstop to the, not the soundtrack, but the original. Well, not that one, but I listen nonstop to the music. And there's a part where they're talking at the drive-in. And, she has this Soch boyfriend, but in the song, they both are saying, I could talk to you for hours. And at the end, he says, he's 14 and he just lost both of his parents in a car wreck. And his two older brothers are raising him. And he says, nobody's ever listened to me or talked to me like she did for those 2 hours at the drive-in. And I was listening to it this morning and I thought, man, you're 14 and you're saying that. And, S.E. Hinton wrote this book years ago, but that you don't feel like you're 14 and you don't feel like anybody has talked to you like that until that one night you get to talk to a female Soch. And that, so, your question is interesting because you said, do you think technology has played into this? And I definitely think it has, but I think this has been an issue for forever.
Who feel like no one is ever interested in their life.
Yeah. It's on, by the way, here's a little plug for The Outsiders. It's going to be on tour soon, and it will be coming to Dallas in November.
Have you driven up to Tulsa and lived at all the Outsiders?
No, but that's on my to-do list. It's definitely I've seen it 6 times, and I can't get enough of it.
It's crazy how that book, and of course, franchises that spun off of musicals and things like that, is still, but it is written that long.
Is it? I was going to ask you guys, do kids now still read S.E. Hinton books?
Yes. Oh, yes.
I know my children do, but I don't know.
You should see the Stage Door there on Broadway. You should see, there are people like me in their 50s who remember the book. And
50s? Yeah, you're old.
I know. Well, it is what it is.
I think you lied on your HR. When you talk to HR, I think you lied on your app.
But then you see all these kids who are 12, 13, 14, 15, and they're making artwork for the actors. And they've made, they painted things. And one girl, my favorite cast member, Daryl, who's the older brother raising the 2 brothers, there's a line in one of the songs, and a girl he wrote out the line on something for this girl, and she took it to a tattoo artist and had it tattooed on her arm. I mean, people are out there with creative things. I bring them gifts.
Did you guys watch any of the movies? I think the movies are very underrated.
Every 80s star was in that original.
Asa, but I'm talking deep, like that was then, this is now, with Emilio Estevez and I don't know, Craig Sheffer. I think
C. Thomas Howell, Tom Cruise.
I mean, it was a big deal to me. It influenced. S.E. Hinton played a big part in my life.
And do you know She's still alive.
She's still alive.
And she had to put her name as S.E. Hinton instead of, I think her first name is.
Agender, is that what
Yeah. I think her first name is Sarah or Shelley. I can't remember. I really should know. But she had to put Arthur S.E. Hinton because in order to get it published, she felt like, what did you just call it?
Degenerate.
Yeah, she had to. But now she doesn't have to. So yeah, I mean, it's just.
S.E.N. is kind of a cool name.
It is.
This is the one who wrote the 50 Shades of Grey. Wasn't that another person who just did initials? Or am I thinking of J.K. Rowling did?
Oh, J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. Yeah.
Who did the 50 Shades stuff? That was Stephanie Meyer. Or was that Twilight?
Twilight, Stephanie Meyer, for sure. Okay. My kids were all in that. I know that one. I'd get in trouble if I didn't know that one. 50 Shades, I didn't. Unfortunately, I was just into the movies. I never got into the books. I'm more of a visual person.
I wasn't into it at all.
Well, that's we could do a whole podcast on my obsession with Dakota Johnson's. Well, what did it? Yeah, let's not even go there. This is about insurance. This is about insurance.
Yeah, bring it back, Mark. Bring it back.
Right back. Come on. I do want to talk a little about the ticket because I think that's what you're known for, the ticket thing. I think that's what first of all, real quick, how did you get all the other stuff? I mean, you're an author, you've done acting. I saw the movie you did, or the mockumentary you did. How'd that come about, man? I mean, that's
everything that I've done outside of the ticket. I am like the least proactive person in my life. Like, I just wait for somebody to ask me to do something, and then I hope that they forget they asked me to do it. But then when it comes to like writing a column for the Morning News or for the acting stuff that I've done, or what else?
Writing a book.
Yeah, he's nice to do that. The TV stuff where I would interview like movie people and things like that. All that just kind of fell into my lap, and it was a matter of me either saying yes or no to it. And my inclination is always to say no to everything.
Right.
And I have to always force myself with a little dialectical inside my own head of arguing against myself and saying, no, this fell into your pathway for a reason. Why not say yes? It may be an amateur.
Let me guess,
Overcome that initial.
I was going to say, after you say yes, do you question, can I do this?
Of course, yes. Every day I've ever done, I've been unqualified to do.
So that at least that gets me back to what we talked about earlier. Do you ever step back and go, I'm a badass? I mean, never. I mean, not that you're a badass, but I mean, do you ever say, I was a kid in Richardson one time. At some point, I'm sure Skip yelled at me. Skip was yelling. I mean, here I am. I've been on covers of magazines. I've interviewed celebrities.
You've interviewed Sir.
Yeah, that's another podcast. Lila and Ed Asriel. Yeah.
The only time I ever.
In Texas, the road is part of who we are. From Dallas traffic to Hill Country back roads, you need coverage that keeps up. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we're proud to serve Texans with the best home, auto, and business insurance paired with honest rates, real protection, and local agents who understand life around here. Call us for a quote at 1-855-887-5656 or visit us at nwagencies.com.
Had some measure of success with. It's always as a result of when I'm down, or I feel incompetent, or I feel like I've wasted my life, or, in depression, you start having all these thoughts, negative self-talk that goes on in your head. And years ago, I started, when I would talk that way with, someone that, an intimate friend or relationship of my own, they would say things, well, that's ridiculous, or a therapist would say, look at the evidence, check your negative self-talk with something that's real. And so I learned to argue with myself. I always have arguments with myself inside my mind.
Or give yourself credit.
It's not even arguments. It's like I listen to interesting conversations between different parts of myself.
Right.
A better way of putting it. And I learned to counteract or counter-argue the things that the negative voice in my head would say, which will be like, you wasted your life. And then I would say, no, that's not true. You've had a job that you've been employed for this long. That's good. You've had people come up to you and say that you made a joke one time that really lifted them in a really horrible mood that they were having that day. That's good. All of these little victories in life add up to, I was fortunate in the world. I was fortunate in the world to be born in this country at this time in the world and have health for as many years as I've had. I could be diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, but I don't want to look at let's say I died tomorrow. I don't want to look at the 30 years more that I could have had to the exclusion of the 50 years that I did.
Right. No, I get that.
So I only look at the accomplishments that I've had when I'm feeling like I haven't had any accomplishments. And when I'm really running myself down, I have to remind myself that no, I got to do something that meant something to other people and does. And if it meant something to other people, why am I not allowing it to mean something to me?
Do you think a lot of successful people are like that? Do you think they self-question themselves, or do you think there's people out there that are so confident they just do it?
I don't know. I think there's probably both types.
Because I tend to fall like you. I tend to question myself, like, well,
we always convince ourselves any success we've had has just been luck and has just been, or it's not that big a deal and so on. Humans are very good at running themselves down. There's other people who are very confident. Some would say overconfident, in the times that I've met celebrities, like I used to think that they all were as confident as they appeared on the surface.
They're all 12 feet tall.
Yeah, they're all 12 feet tall. Everything they do is great and everything, but they're absolutely real people. I mean, they're just like that. I can't speak for all of them, right? It's just the ones that I know. It's the same. There are probably people that look at me and think that I'm extremely arrogant and have figured it all out, everything. I never have self-doubt or anything. Yeah. Not just because of what I've done, but because that's the way we look at everyone else. At least I always grew up thinking that everybody else had it together in life and I didn't.
Yeah.
But when you talk with people and you get their life story, you find out that no, everyone's we all struggle with similar things because we're all humans that are running the same firmware on our hardware. Our minds, human minds, work in a particular way. And so that's why we're all kind of put on this earth to help each other through the journey, from the cradle to grave, and we each have our part.
Are you getting back to Ticket? Are you really friends with your personalities that you share there with, or do y'all talk outside of the office, or is it kind of a 9-to-5 type deal?
It's interesting because that has changed over the years, as everybody got older, people got married, people have kids, and it's different than it was in the early days. Lila was there at the very, very beginning of the Ticket, and that's all we did was all hang out together. Yeah. And
the compound.
We worked together, we lived together, we partied together the rest of the night. It was just, our friendships were very active in those times, during those days.
Everyone's younger too.
Yeah. And then you grow up and you don't hang out near as right you do because you have, you've passed that developmental stage, and that developmental stage for your life, that's all you do is hang out with friends, and your friends are people you work with. And when you get families and you have kids and spouses, those are the people you're supposed to be hanging out with, having experience.
Exactly.
For
the most part.
I'd say you don't ever hang out with us, but we don't hang out as much as we used to, but we still consider each other dear friends.
You mentioned that you've shut it down from 4 hours to 3 hours, and we all get to that point where you get to the tipping point where you realize I have more years behind me than I do in front of me. Have you thought, I've got a plan that I'm going to start shutting it down about right here at this age?
I haven't. I think probably Craig is much more the planner than George.
Really? That's surprising on the air. To me, George comes across as the dad of the group.
Yeah. No, George is, Craig is much more, he thinks in real defined terms. I don't know Craig's plans, but he thinks things out well into the future. Yeah. George and I are much more alike and we go with the flow, and we just kind of like doing the job enough that we're kind of, still doing it. And so why rock the boat? I mean, I'm the worst of the three of us about planning. Like you can ask Lila, she has to send me text messages. I mean, she did not.
She does. I wasn't worried at all. I was 100% confident you were going to share.
The worst.
But you also reminded me. You said, "Don't forget to remind me." And so I did. And I thought, if it's getting on his nerves, he'll tell me. Worst case scenario, but it's not going to get on his nerves because he told me to remind him.
You did hear this morning. He did a whole segment on how you bugged the hell out of him.
What, you know what? Everybody could do a segment like that.
Yeah, here go the podcast. Episode number 2. Okay, real quick, because I know we're running out of time. I know you got things to do, and it's probably raining outside. I just want to put my P1 hat on and just ask you some names, and just give me some quick responses. Take it wherever you want to go, and tell me what comes to your mind when I throw these names out. Okay, Skip Bayless.
Oh man, Skip. I don't know him well enough to understand him, so I'm working on a particular form of understanding of him. Skip is a very isolated person. I'm not exactly sure how his mind worked, even though he worked with us. Yeah, he always worked apart from us. And none of us really feel like we knew him, even though we spent a year and a half with him working there.
It's funny how that come across the air.
He's an odd
Okay. I get that. Jennifer Smith, you're the co-host. Whatever happened to her?
Jennifer, I don't know what happened to her. I know that I think she moved to Buffalo right after she worked at the Ticket. But I don't know if she has returned and moved back here to Dallas. I know her parents lived here and her sister lived here, and so she may have moved back here since then. Jennifer was a really incredible go-getter, man. I've never met someone who was more focused and determined and worked hard to learn things. Like, I was really impressed with how if she didn't know something, she was one of these people that would work hard to get herself to the point where she could do it. And approach that way in life is really inspiring to me. Because I was always, am I naturally good at something? If not, I just then don't do it. But she was one of the people that exposed me to this idea of, if you're not naturally good at something, but you're interested in it, that's where you ought to gravitate it and spend more time.
Put effort.
Yeah.
Direction. She probably, yeah. So how old was she much older than you when y'all did that?
I think she's probably, yeah, she's maybe 7 years older than me. I'm not exactly sure how much older. I can't remember. But, she had several big accomplishments before you with the Ticket. Like, she had a TV show. It was like, I want to do a TV show and I want it to be about this. And so she learned how to do TV and production and everything, and learned how to sell it. And
just like you, I launched her career on the
yeah.
Okay, Kate Delaney, the sports princess. I bring her up because she was in my first wedding.
Oh, really? She was. Yeah. Kate, I don't know where I think she's still in town.
Is she really?
Yeah, because I have no idea. Like every 5 years or so,
I lost her in the divorce.
It's a text for because we are obsessed with her interview with O.J. Simpson, so we replay it, once every few years. Sometimes she'll reach out.
All right. How about original Ticket host Kurt Menefee? Any word from him? Do you ever talk to him?
Kurt Menefee is a guy that just makes me so happy. Every time I see him or talk to him, his voice just makes me happy. It was thrilling to watch Kurt's incredible rise after the Ticket. I remember when he left to go up to New York and become a news anchor, a sports anchor up in New York. And I just thought that was so magical because I love New York City. And then he gets the Fox job, and now we see him every weekend on Fox Sports and Fox NFL. So Kurt's a great guy and always in a good mood. I never saw him in a bad mood the whole time I worked.
Just a couple more. Okay, this was a little controversial. Rocco Pendola.
Rocco, interesting story. Rocco and we butted heads when he worked at the Ticket. He was a young guy. I think he was even younger than me, maybe by a couple of years. And I was kind of the youngest at the Ticket for forever. It seemed like. And then Rocco came in, and the Ticket was a very closed bunker or fraternity at the time because we all started together in this warlike condition. There was a nucleus mentality, and he comes from the outside from Miami. I think he was from there. Philadelphia before that, from Pittsburgh. And so we butted heads when he was there. After he left there, he and I started up a correspondence and really gained a huge appreciation for each other and became friendly. And Rocco's a really impressive guy, very, very smart guy. You know, he was another one that was just determined. He didn't go to school or anything. He just knew he wanted to be a radio host and became like one of the youngest radio hosts in the country. Yeah, the age of like 19, because it was so focused and determined.
Yeah, he seemed like he took a different path than you. You kind of like ended up there, and he was going to try to force his way in there.
I fell into
Yeah.
it, and he
probably resented that.
But it came across, that's probably why we butted heads so much in the early days, was because we each hated the part in the other one that we wanted for ourselves.
All right.
And it was a psychological lesson for me when I finally recognized that I tend to have these strong reactions to people that I feel threatened by, not in the sense of that he was threatening my job. It was that it's psychologically, it's much deeper than that. I was psychologically threatening to me that having discipline and focus comes so natural to that person. And I feel so deficient in that area that I'm really, maybe threat's not the best word, but it's envious of the quality is there.
So looking back, you see the part that you maybe played and that breakdown.
Sure, sure, absolutely, yeah. It was hard to get along with for many reasons. Being a jokester and everything, and feeling envious of his discipline.
Yeah, I will say I was listening that Saturday, I think it was, when he had the breakdown, and it was awesome radio. Okay, Grego.
Oh man, you write a Russian novel about Grego. Grego is another figure that I don't know that I fully understand him. I loved working with him. The fake Grego character that I used to do is still my favorite character I've ever done. Grego, I hate that he's still not at the tickets. He was a guy who developed, for those that don't know, he ended up with drug problems, and that went on. It was a difficult situation for the station, and eventually he was let go. But I just wonder what could have been had he stayed here, because really and truly, as much as I love our show that we do, the early Hardline show, which Mike Reiner is no longer there, and Grego, that was some of the most electric campus radio I've ever experienced in my life. Just tuning into them and hearing what they were going to say. And they were just, Grego was really the star of the station before he left in 2007, I think it was.
Well, you guys were doing something that had really never been done before. I mean, there was sports radio. I remember sports radio, and it was just sports talk. It was all it was. And you guys came along and just changed the whole game.
Blew it out of the water.
Blew it out of the water, man. So last one here, it's not a person, but it's actually taken on a personality of its own life. Tell me a little bit about Lee Harvey Oswald's bathtub.
Lee Harvey Oswald's bathtub. I own Lee Harvey Oswald's bathtub. I'm not proud of that fact. And
you probably need to insure it, by the way.
Kind of fell to me. There was a story of Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment building being torn down because it was in arrears on taxes. The owner was in arrears of taxes and so they were going to tear it down, and she was selling off everything in the apartment. And there were some things that had not sold. And I went in there like a day or two before they tore it down, and with the woman who owned the apartment building at the top. So I'll take that and that. I got the bathtub. I got the built-in vanity. I removed the built-in vanity. They add the bathroom doors, and I have a drawer from the built-in dresser inside the closet. And the reason I got those things was because the bathtub is mentioned several times in the Warren Report. Marina talked about how her first New Year's in America, she didn't speak English. He was her only communication with the world, because everything had to go through him, because he kind of spoke half Russian. And she was so depressed because he was abusive towards her. This is her first New Year's in America, which was supposed to be the land of dreams, freedom, and everything. And here she was trapped inside this apartment with his abusive husband who didn't like to do anything or be social or anybody. And she lay in that bathtub on New Year's Eve and dreamed that it was filled with champagne because she thought that was the mark of a sophisticated rich woman. And that was her girlish fantasy. That was her escape, laying in that bathtub, arranging it filled with champagne. And it was also the same bathtub that she, I believe, a few weeks later, maybe a few days later, stood on the side of and tried to hang herself in the shower curtain. So this one old, ridiculous cast iron bathtub represented both this high point of her fantasy and the low point of her actually trying to do something to exit the dreary condition she was in. And it's also where Lee Oswald used to like to lay and read his communist papers that come up with all his ideas of his political activism. So I think the genesis of the assassination happened while he was laying in that bathtub when he decided to attempt to assassinate General Edward Walker, which he had tried to do before.
I think you're right. I think in that bathtub, there's got to be something. It's kind of like Chucky or something, or the bathtub, you know?
Yeah, so this bathtub held a lot of memory. The little drawer in the built-in dresser I got because that's where they used to put their baby, June. She would sleep in that thing as a makeshift little crib. And so I got that. So, these are just moments.
Have you ever had it evaluated? Have you ever had it appraised? Take it on Antique Roadshow or anything and show up and say, you could be sitting on you could be sitting, you could have already been retired,
Yeah, I sold it. It was worth any money.
Okay, that leads me all the way back to Dallas, which is our last 5 questions, and we'll let you get out here and get home. And these are Dallas staples, Lila. I think we need to ask everyone who is on the show. We need to ask.
Absolutely.
It makes up.
Can I start it off?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so I love food. We all know that, and that's my food and beverage are my love language. So, what's your favorite Tex-Mex? What's your go-to Tex-Mex place in DFW, and what's your go-to Tex-Mex order at that place?
There's a place up in North Dallas I like called Don Pepe's. Take it there all the time. It's enchiladas they have, which is this great free cheese enchiladas with I think it has like white cheese in it. But then we'll put lots of diced onions on the top of it, with lettuce and tomatoes on top of it. Then they put the sauce on. It's really great. So I love that. I love cheese enchiladas. Place that serves good cheese enchiladas. Joe T. Garcia's and Fort Worth has great cheese enchiladas. Love them. What was the other part of your questions?
Oh, just your go-to order, your go-to place. Yes. Do you?
My go-to place.
He's here, isn't he?
But I also like, Mi Casina. I still have fondness for Mi Casina. And I get the chips. I order a side of ranch.
Yes. I like to do that at Papacitas because their salsa always comes out warm for some reason. And then you dump the ranch in it, and there's no place I've ever enjoyed them as much as there.
And also shout out to El Phoenix for their
old school
chips. I love the chips at El.
But is it the same?
Fluffy.
Yeah, they used to be. They went corporate. I know the corporate. Yeah, they're not. They're no longer Mexican owned. And I can say that as been Mexican, they're no longer Mexican owned. So it might have changed a little. They lose a little something in the dilation
when we white people come in.
Yeah,
when white Phoenix does is they serve their salsa in that little bitty ramekin.
Yes, small thing. Yeah, so you kind of have to pour it on the chip almost. Same question, barbecue. Since barbecue's big here in DFW, we've got favorite place and go-to order.
I'm not a huge barbecue guy. I love barbecue, but it's like I don't go on kicks where I really want to try this place and that place and that place. So I don't have a standard barbecue place.
So we'll just say, we'll say Dickey's, just to keep it simple.
Yeah, so it's well known. Dickey's is the one I eat at the most.
Yeah.
What's the place though down there that's by the Federal Reserve Building? I always forget the name of it.
City Hall.
No. I don't go get barbecue there. No, there's a barbecue place right behind the Federal Reserve Building, and they're open for lunch. I don't even know that they're open for dinner, and it is so good. And every time you go by there, instead of instead of being open for dinner, they always have parties there, engagement parties, but wedding parties. They have really good barbecue there, but I can never remember the name. But we'll move on. What's the next?
Well, what do you get when you do order barbecue?
Oh, yeah.
Do you get brisket or sausage?
Those are brisket, sausage as well, but brisket's the main one. And then some good ribs. I love when you get a place that has good ribs.
Yeah, the big beef.
It creeps me out that I'm eating straight off the
Flintstone style. It is, but it is what it is. And we kind of got into this a little bit, but do you believe that JFK was a lone shooter or was it a conspiracy?
the JFK.
The assassination. Was he a shooter? Did he shoot himself?
Yeah. I think, and I'm open to any evidence to the contrary, but I think it's very clear. It's almost a Rorschach test on the way humans think. The fact that we have overcomplicated a case that it actually is very, very straightforward.
Wow,
If I really present you with any other murder in which I said, "Hey, listen, we have a guy was shot and killed, okay, but the guy who we think shot you killed and actually worked at the building. Isn't that too suspicious that he would work at that building and therefore he was in that building? And he also had his own, he was shot with this guy's gun too. And the guy was not seen at the time that the actual shooting happened. No one actually saw him to establish an alibi. Oh, and he was the only guy that actually fled the building afterwards, after this murder happened, and tried to get away during the roll call of all the employees. He was the only one that left. And the reason he said he left was a little bit suspicious. He just said that he thought there was going to be no more work that day, so that he would just go and see a movie. Oh, and it's also a little bit suspicious that the guy was tremendously interested in politics, but had zero interest in the leader of the free world driving right in front of his workplace.
Yeah,
Which even people who weren't interested in politics were very interested in that, because the leader of the free world right in front of your workplace.
So you're saying we convinced ourselves that...
I mean, yeah, like all these things that you would go, wait a second, I can solve this case for you, detective, really quickly. If there's any other murder, and all this laundry list of evidence against this person, and there being no really good, credible evidence towards someone else, and you would go, well, that's easy. But we don't like it to be easy in the JFK case, because it becomes a labyrinth that we love wandering around in.
Yeah.
And it has an intrigue.
And there's money in it now at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, we like intrigue.
Yeah.
So, and then you just do the Jedi mind trick if you're a conspiracy theorist, to say all the evidence that points towards him is evidence that he didn't do it, because it would only be a very powerful organization that could create all their ass against someone who didn't do it. Therefore, the fact there is so much evidence against him is proof that the CIA did it, because they're the only ones strong enough to create all the evidence.
I've always been on the other side of the fence, but that actually is the best argument I've ever heard for the lone gunman. And it almost convinced me, but okay.
I started as a conspiracy theorist.
I mean, that is laid it out. Like, just kind of like, shut up, dude. Here, listen to this. Okay. Real quick. I know you're not the sports guy at the ticket, but best Cowboy coach in history.
I would say Jimmy.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're Mr. Controversy today.
Yeah. And I think that I would do it. And I love Landry, because when I was a little boy, I grew up with Landry and so on. And I like Landry as a human being an awful lot. But what Jimmy came in and did in such a short period of time, and the amount of turnaround that he did during that time, I would say that it's Jimmy.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is very surprising. Full of surprise.
That's controversial.
This is more interesting than any character you do, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. This is the last one, I promise. If you could pick one person that represents the city of Dallas, who would that person be?
Lila.
Well, I mean, the obvious. The obvious. I would say Northwestern Insurance, Lila. You know. So, yeah. I mean, if someone from the outside say, "Hey, man, tell me if you could represent who's Dallas," you had to tell me who Dallas is. Who would that be?
I would say Larry Hagman.
That is a great answer.
Because Larry
of the internet,
he plays J.R. Ewing, which he played an incredible, great Dallas villain in that. But Larry Hagman as a person was so very nice and contrary to that. So I think he represents the yin and yang of Dallas in one person.
Not only that, the international reach he had with the character. I mean, everybody knows who JR is.
But I've traveled overseas. So I say I'm from Dallas. The first person they usually mention, even still to this day, is J.R. Ewing, a character that hadn't been on the air since 1980 or something, 81. And second person they usually mention is George W. Bush. was asked me on those two.
Oh, wow. What a great answer. I think, Lila, with those last 5 questions, we found out why this gentleman is in the position he is in and why he sits here and tells us, oh, I don't know. Well, I don't know this. I don't know how to do that. I mean, those answers really were just so thoughtful. And
Gives us some more insight into.
And I'm still a little confused on how and why you're friends with Lila, but
Because he's very talented.
he's that impact that it's got to be all that impact.
Character that's based on Lila.
I know. Can you? Do you have time to tell us about that in 2 seconds?
There's a character I do, which is one of my co-host, George. He was a swimmer in high school. And so I've been this character of his swim coach that we call Marge. And the voice that I assigned her when I was trying to coming up with voice for her is Lila. I always used to imitate Lila. We'd hang out the early days. And to her, what kind of rough sounding voice? Exaggerate.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Wow.
What I always say to you.
You're so talented. You're so talented.
Can you say this? Thank you for calling Northwest Insurance.
Thank you for calling Northwest.
Oh my God, man, doppelganger. Man,
That is so fun.
they've definitely moved the uncloning sheep. I think they just cloned somebody else. Yeah, that's awesome. And can I ask you one question? In the future, if people ask me, is Gordon Keith, hey, can I tell people you're my friend?
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I can tell them awesome. Well,
Can I, Gordon?
no. Gordon,
Y'all go way back. Y'all go back further
We
than
do.
we do. Y'all go back further than we do.
we're going to discuss a tour. We're going to review tour, the podcast meme tour. Yeah, getting this back together. It's like, all right, Gordon, thank you so much for being here. Be safe going home. Anything in the future we can ever do for you, please, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome to come back on this show. All right.
And I want to give a couple of shout outs very quickly to Jojo, who we work with, who's our man on the street and who's responsible for our great social media. And also a big shout out to our friend Evan, who composed our new jingle for the podcast. And if y'all want to send us some questions about insurance that we can answer on future podcasts, email us at info@nwagencies.com. CIES agencies.com and info@nwagencies.com.
All right. You've been listening to Beyond the Policy, covering everything Dallas, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.